Welcome to This Explainer. Have you ever looked at a situation, thought you understood exactly what was happening, only to have the floor completely drop out from underneath you? Well, today, we're analyzing source material that proves just how deceptive the surface level can really be. We'll be examining three unbelievable cases where the initial, tragic premise fractures into unimaginable deceptions. Okay, let's dive right in, because sometimes reality is far darker and way more convoluted than fiction, as the facts derived from these sources are going to show us. What you're about to hear goes way beyond simple true crime. These are narratives where literally every single layer peeled back reveals a completely different reality. We're going to look at three distinct stories, where the illusion of normalcy hid some absolutely massive secrets hiding right in plain sight. Case File 1, The Devoted Father. Let's start with Sharon and Frank, a complex story that initially just looks like a series of really unfortunate tragedies. So, on the surface, Sharon was this brilliant Georgia Tech ROTC student whose life kind of derailed after a teenage pregnancy. She ended up giving her first child up for adoption and found herself bound to an older, really aggressive man named Frank down in Florida. To support their son Michael, she worked as an exotic dancer, basically trapped by Frank's violent threats. It's a sad story, right? But it gets so much worse. Tragedy strikes when Sharon dies in a highly suspicious hit-and-run. Now Frank attempts to claim an $80,000 life insurance policy, and that's when everything completely unravels. When he tried to cash in that massive policy, he kept using aliases and fake social security numbers. Finally, to get the money, he was forced to give his real name, Franklin Delano Floyd. The second his real name hit the system, his horrifying criminal history came to light. He wasn't just an aggressive partner. He was a violent fugitive. He had actually abducted a 4-year-old child back in 1962 and then attempted to abduct a woman in 1972 before vanishing. Frank was arrested and young Michael was placed in foster care. But then, a DNA test proved Frank wasn't even Michael's biological father, which triggered this terrifying escalation. Upon his release from prison in 1994, Frank literally held an elementary school principal at gunpoint, tied him to a tree, and kidnapped little Michael. Now, what completely blows this case wide open is the evidence they found in Frank's stolen, abandoned truck in Kansas. They found an envelope of 97 photographs. These photos proved he had murdered his wife's missing coworker, Cheryl Camesso, back in 1989. But even more disturbing, there were older photographs showing Frank assaulting a mysterious young girl. So who on earth was this young girl? Finding these photos in 1995 kicked off a massive, desperate search, but it wouldn't be until 2014 that investigators uncovered the jaw-dropping truth. For nearly 2 decades, authorities tried to figure out the identity of this child. To solve it, they had to dig all the way back to Frank's life in the 1970s, when he was married to a woman named Sandy Chipman. And here is the truly monstrous twist. Frank had kidnapped his own stepdaughter when she was just a little girl. He changed her name to Sharon Marshall, raised her, abused her, and eventually posed as her husband. In 2014, Frank finally admitted he also murdered her son, little Michael. It was just a staggering, absolute collapse of a family facade. Moving on to Case File 2, The Family Crow, L'Affaire de Gregory. If our first case showed a monster inside the house, this next one shows what happens when the monster is lurking just outside your window. Back in 1984, in France, 4-year-old Gregory Villemin was tragically found bound and drowned. The very next day, his grieving parents, who, by the way, had been stalked by an anonymous caller known as the Crow for years, received a chilling letter that read, "I hope you die of grief, boss. Your money won't bring back your son. Here's my revenge." And the investigation that followed became almost as tragic as the murder itself. It's like a devastating domino effect. Shifting handwriting experts first blamed the father, Jean-Marie's cousin, Bernard Laroche. But when Laroche was freed, the experts completely pivoted and actually accused Christine, the grieving mother. Driven mad by all of this, Jean-Marie murdered Laroche in revenge, while a pregnant Christine had to stage a harrowing hunger strike in prison just to clear her own name. Fast forward decades later, and the real killer is still a ghost. But now, police are utilizing stylometrics on the terrifying letters, uncovering a brand new unnamed suspect.
See, while DNA on the stamps and ropes proved inconclusive, this linguistic fingerprinting technology looks at exactly how the crow wrote. It analyzes punctuation patterns, syntax, specific turns of phrase, and amazingly, in December of 2020, this technology pointed authorities to a brand new suspect, giving everyone hope that this decades-old illusion of a phantom killer might finally be shattered.
All right, our final story, Case File 3, The Chameleon Imposter. The case of Nicholas Barclay. This is perhaps the most bizarre example of people actively choosing to believe an illusion over reality. Nicholas vanished from Texas in 1994 at age 13, only to be found 3 years later in Spain. But placing these facts side by side, it's just an absolute absurdity. The boy brought back from Europe looked and sounded completely different. The missing Nicholas was a blonde, blue-eyed Texan. The person recovered was a grown man with dark hair, brown eyes, and a heavy French accent. Yet, he somehow convinced authorities that traffickers had chemically altered his appearance with experiments. And, remarkably, Nicholas's own sister accepted him into their home. Well, it turns out a private detective working with a documentary crew noticed something totally off. He realized their ears didn't match. And ears do not change shape as we age. He alerted the FBI, and fingerprints and DNA confirmed that the Barclays were actually harboring a 23-year-old adult French con artist named Frédéric Pierre Bourdin, who had stolen over 500 identities. So the burning question here is, why on earth did the family willingly accept an obvious imposter? Even when Bourdin confessed in court to passport fraud and perjury, the Barclays stubbornly refused to believe he wasn't Nicholas. They literally told investigators to close the case. I mean, how could a family look into the brown eyes of an adult Frenchman and truly believe it was their blue-eyed Texan boy? Investigators started putting the pieces together, and they came up with a pretty chilling theory. The family welcomed this imposter because Nicholas was already dead, and claiming this stranger was him provided the perfect alibi. Both the private investigator and the con artist himself leaned into this. Months after Nicholas vanished, his older brother Jason reported Nicholas trying to break into their house, which is a common tactic to establish a victim is still alive. The theory was that Jason had murdered Nicholas. But before Jason could really face investigation, he died of an overdose, taking the truth with him. What you should absolutely take away from this explainer is that truth is so often obscured by the very people we trust. From a monstrous father hiding in plain sight, to an entire family possibly guarding a dark secret behind an imposter's face, nothing is ever exactly as it seems, leaving us to wonder, when the illusion of normalcy fractures, what other incredible secrets might be quietly walking among us today.